morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. This is the week that Man of Steel becomes a reality. But the question is, what is that reality? A lot of news for Man of Steel broke yesterday. And one of the big things was the premiere of Man of Steel here in New York. And so forgive me, I'm a little tired this morning because I was up very late last night putting those interviews from the red carpet together and posting them. But I have to say, I have some cool behind-the-scenes insights for you today in Morning Movie News that you wouldn't be able to get from the interviews, but there'll be a link to the interviews at the end of this video. But first, let's talk about some of the news that broke yesterday. Deadline reported that Warner Brothers is so pleased with Man of Steel that they have officially announced that, Zack Snyder, the director of Man of Steel, and David Goyer, the writer, have been contractually locked down to do a sequel to Man of Steel, but also the Justice League movie. Now, I would take this news with a grain of salt because as we've been talking about for the last few weeks, this is publicity, Hollywood publicity 101. Getting everybody on board, and just, I think basically the idea here is to say, this is the start of the DC Cinematic Universe. If you want to be there from the beginning, come see this movie. And also, look how happy we are. We're so happy that we're trusting this team with Justice League, which is really, right now at least, the crown jewel movie project at Warner Brothers. However, I was on the red carpet last night, and I asked a number of the top producers, Thomas Tull from Legendary. When you see him in the video, you might be like, who is this guy? Why did you take the time to get him to talk to him? And I had to stop him and ask him to do an interview because he is a major player. He is the founder and CEO of Legendary Pictures, which is behind all the DC movies, also Pacific Rim. And he's doing such a good job for Warner Brothers that rumor is that Jeff Robinov, a very nice man who always talks to me at these premieres, he talked to me at both The Great Gatsby and The Hobbit. I really appreciated it because I was in the back for those premieres and I really needed to get some interviews, and he was really gracious. But sadly, the rumor is that he might be out and that Warner Brothers might bring Thomas Tull in. Instead of just having a deal with Legendary Pictures, they'll bring him in-house to run their movie studio. So he's a big deal guy. So Snyder, Goyer, Tull, and also the other big producer on the film, his name escapes me at the moment, but they all said, we would like to make a DC Cinematic Universe based on this film, but we have to see how the fans accept it. Both, I think, critics, in terms of like whether or not they like it, what the buzz is, and also, of course, box office wise. Now, the other big thing that happened late last night is that the embargo was lifted on Man of Steel reviews. As you'll notice in Movie Math, I talked about the fact they were waiting to very close to the release date to get those numbers up. And fascinatingly, it's settled to around 70% right now on Rotten Tomatoes. It's hovering around there, 71, 72, it's in that vicinity. And I think that is a very interesting first step. I mean, I haven't seen the movie yet, even though I was at the premiere last night. I'm supposed to go to a screening tonight, so I'm hoping that everything works out and I'll have my reviews up for you tomorrow. But 70%, I think, obviously, any of you would agree, is not a great start. And, it's good to have that confidence from Warner Brothers to counteract that. And also, so this kind of, leads me in to the whole behind the scenes on the red carpet. Really interesting situation. Christopher Nolan was there, but Christopher Nolan would not do any interviews. He ran through that carpet really fast. I even stopped his publicist, and she was like, he's not doing any interviews. And so there are two reasons that could be. The positive reason is that this is Zack Snyder's moment. Christopher Nolan does not want to take away from that, which I think he obviously would, so he's very graciously stepping aside. But I would have to say from a studio perspective, I'm trying to be really even balanced here. I know a lot of you feel I have it out for this movie. I don't. I would love to see a great Superman movie, but I always call things like I see them, so I'm trying to give you all the possibilities. So that's the positive one. From a studio perspective, though, I would want Christopher Nolan doing these interviews. Man of Steel is so crucial to the future of the studio and to Warner Brothers DC movies in general that I think the movie could use all the help it can get going into its opening weekend, and you want those Christopher Nolan sound bites. Now, the more pessimistic reason, which I kind of am leaning towards, especially when I'm seeing the 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the majority of the negative reviews, by the way, are from the top critics. It'll be interesting to see how many people, and even Bleeding Cool, which is a very honest website that I report for and I'm associated with for Think About the Ink, they had problems with the film. Serious problems. I mean, they liked some things about it too, but they had problems with the film. So my guess is that as this is actually beginning to take shape, there's going to be, I think, the hardcore demographic, and also some opportunists who I feel are going to jump out and be like, it's the best movie ever made. and then find out that perhaps it's not. Not to say it's a bad movie, but I'm having a hard time with the way things are shaping up in the 70% believing that it's going to be as good as The Dark Knight, which I feel is, The Dark Knight is still, someone asked me about this the other day, The Dark Knight, the second one with Heath Ledger, is still, I think, the best comic book movie ever made. I think The Avengers is the best comic book movie at capturing what it's like to read a comic. And actually, I'd amend that. I guess I'd say that The Avengers perfectly captures what it's like to read a Marvel comic, and The Dark Knight perfectly captures what it's like to read a DC comic. Although I would also add that The Dark Knight is a film that transcends the comic book world, and is just a fantastic film on its own, which maybe I think is what makes it a little more special than The Avengers. So anyway, I'm getting a little off track here. As I said, I'm tired. I was up very late last night getting that Man of Steel coverage up. But so I think that Christopher Nolan kind of, maybe doesn't want to be too closely associated with this. I think he just wants the producer credit, and, he has such a wonderful track record that I think that you're seeing a kind of a very political move here, where it's like, Zack Snyder, take the limelight, but also take the blame for what's, doesn't work. Because it'll be interesting to see, more reviews are going to start coming in, and it'll be interesting to see where that Rotten Tomatoes number ends up. But, I'm going to see the film for myself, and I think everybody, at least this first weekend is going to judge the film for itself, because it's going to be the movie of the moment. I don't know how it's going to do going forward, what word of mouth will do with it, but we'll see. So that's one behind-the-scenes thing on the red carpet that Nolan just buzzed by. The other interesting thing that I found very fascinating is that Chadwick Boseman was there. He is the actor who played Jackie Robinson in 42, which is a film produced by Legendary Pictures. But not only was he on the red carpet, but he was very friendly with Thomas Tull. And it wasn't like Chadwick Boseman was going after Thomas Tull. Thomas Tull was interested in speaking to Chadwick Boseman. So that means to me that Legendary Pictures is very interested in him as an actor and feels he is a real talent find for them, which is great because I think a lot of us feel he did a really great job in 42. It did well at the box office. So, and as I said, you're going to see the DC and Marvel movie studios jockeying to sign him up. But if he's that tight with Thomas Tull, expect him to go the DC way. So who would you like to see him play? There's Cyborg, and of course there's Green Lantern. I think Cyborg is somewhat of a thankless role, but so I would like to see him go with a Jon Stewart Green Lantern. That would be very exciting. So that was some cool behind the scenes movie news. Yes, there is news happening outside of the DC movie universe. The new Hercules film with Brett Ratner and Dwayne Johnson started filming for Paramount. That's great that Dwayne Johnson and Paramount have such a wonderful relationship. He's of course in their G.I. Joe films. So that's exciting, but also the cast sounds pretty good. It's going to be a Hercules in a world where there's no supernatural element, so it'll be very interesting to see how they can do that, considering Hercules is supposed to be literally a child of the gods, of Zeus. So I don't know if the myth will work without that element, but great, interesting cast. You have Ian McShane, who I absolutely adore. I used to watch him actually as a little kid on Lovejoy with my parents. Shout out for old British television, but also, of course, he's fantastic on Deadwood. Rufus Sewell is also in the movie, and I imagine he must be playing someone related to Ian McShane because they look very similar, but I love them both. And also even John Hurt. Now, I think John Hurt lately has proven that he will pretty much be in any movie to get a paycheck, but of course he's a really talented, wonderful actor, and so any movie's lucky to have him, so that they should be happy he has that policy. So those are the 3 movie news stories for the day. Man of Steel was kind of a 2-parter. And also I'm going to answer one question, and it kind of plays into the whole Man of Steel discussion. Someone wrote and they said, Grace, why was Battleship such a box office disaster? I liked it. I didn't think it was a horrible movie. I don't think it deserved to flop as bad as it did. Which is interesting, because I kind of liked Battleship too. I saw Battleship, I had a great day, I made a day of it. It was a day I was hanging out with my dad. My mom was out of town, so I was on dad duty. And we had a really fun time going to the Intrepid museum here in New York City, which is you can go on an actual battleship carrier. So when we went to see Battleship later in the day, we had already spent a day on a battleship. We kind of knew all the areas and what a lot of the characters were talking about, and it really made for a special day. And I wish that instead of a box set, that movie could be offered as a box experience, and everyone would get to see it that way. I think they would have enjoyed it a lot more. But the reason the film didn't do well is for a number of reasons, and it really goes to show that And I think everyone should take this to heart, that even if a film doesn't do well at the box office, while it might sadly mean that you will never see a sequel and it might hurt a lot of the people's careers associated with that film, like Taylor Kitsch. Where's Taylor Kitsch? And where is he? He's not working because he had a horrible summer last year. Everything with John Carter, Battleship, and even Savages. So I think that even though I love Taylor Kitsch as an actor, as a business person, as a Hollywood executive, I would be very reluctant to hire him at this point. I just don't think he would deliver. And I think that's the main reason that Battleship didn't work out. Mainstream audiences just have decided they don't like Taylor Kitsch. But anyway, if a movie doesn't work out, that shouldn't detract from your liking it. It's just the way things shake out sometimes. It's just a hard truth of the business, but that movie still exists for you to enjoy. And I would keep that in mind for you really big Man of Steel fans, that even, no matter how this thing goes, don't let it detract from whether or not you actually enjoy the movie itself. So anyway, Battleship, I think Taylor Kitsch was a huge problem for that film. I also think that film had some horrible publicity, and it just, unfortunately, just something really, it got a bad rep before it even opened. And sometimes that just happens. Reputation is huge. That's why publicity is so important to a movie. That's why it's so important for studios to shape the conversation. For instance, I wrote a comic book called Hercules, and everyone who's read the comic really likes it. But I have to tell you, the title Hercules, which was thought up by Marvel Editorial before I even came on board to write it, just was instantly mocked by the comic book press, and sadly, the story just, it never got beyond that. It just was never able to find an audience and overcome that initial bout of negative publicity. Even though, as I said, every time I go to a convention, also the artist Craig Rousseau, when he goes to a convention, people come up and say they really enjoyed that miniseries. And so you see, I am brutally honest even with myself and my own projects. So, that's what it is, Battleship. It's shaping the conversation PR-wise. It's having actors that click with the audience, the mainstream. No matter how good they are, if they don't click with the audience, they're not good. And so all those things come into play, and also competition. But I think with Battleship, those were the elements. An actor that nobody was interested in, unfortunately, and also just a really bad publicity campaign, and that movie just became a joke before it opened. So that's Morning Movie News. Thanks for watching. Write down what you'd like to see maybe covered tomorrow, and any questions you might like me to answer. Bye.